I was wondering a little bit more, and I know this kind of got off topic by now, but you mentioned Startup America. Can you like maybe detail a little bit more about how that works? And I'm curious because there's this thing called Startup Chile that is, I think, maybe the same thing. It's almost like an incubator created by the government in Chile. I'm Chilean, so this is kind of why.
It's not an incubator. I think it's more programs just for creating growth. And what are the policies that we need to implement in order for startup and entrepreneurship to take place in the U.S.? And so it's not about incubation. It's not about particular companies. It's about how can government play a role in that. My general take is government should just stay far, far away. Yeah.
I have a question on how those unknowns kind of convert a company into being a high-growth, high-tech startup.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the way I think about it is I always construct sort of, there's one model that if you guys read Alexander Osterwalder's book on business model generation, he has his model that we actually teach in our class, but it's not exactly the way I think about business model, so it's always hard for me to remember what his diagram looks like. So I'm going to just sort of present my version of the diagram to you guys. So on the right-hand side, I always think of the sort of customers and users. And so what's the difference between a customer and a user? Payments, yeah. So customers usually give you dollars. Users will give you maybe their attention. They'll use your product. They'll interact with it. And so here, what you're trying to do within the business model is identify what are the archetypes of your customers who are paying for it, and then what are the archetypes of the people who are using it. And so you should always have your hypotheses around very specific psychographics and demographics around who your users and customers are. Customers is actually a lot more complicated, I think, than people give it credit. So if you're talking about sort of straightforward consumer internet startup, this can be actually quite straightforward. But if you think about, are any of you working at companies that are going to be selling into businesses? Great. So who's your customer?
Any business that needs an intern.
Okay. Could it be a large company?
Yeah, anyone, like from Disney to like a very small startup.
Great. So who is the ultimate customer there? Can it be any person within the company?
Depends.
It's usually the company's recruiting money.
It's the HR department? Yeah. Great. And so within the HR department, the HR buys into it. Do you automatically get interns placed into your companies?
There's a guarantee.
There's a guarantee? Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So what if someone in there, no one within the company wants to hire that intern?
Well, there's a large pool, another pool. So.
Right, but you have to get some sort of buy-in from the actual organization at some point to use these interns, correct? Or is there already a program into which you're linking yourself?
What do you mean by that?
So if you're Disney, are you just linking into an internship program that they already have, or do you have to build something?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit more simple. What's another example of business?
It's a large-scale battery company, so their customers would be like utility companies or like large universities.
Okay, so who within the utility company are you selling into?
Whoever would be in charge of finding energy storage, because currently they're just like pump hydro.
Is that like a VP level person? Do you know what the title of that person is?
I don't know the exact title.
So typically what you would do in a customer development cycle for that, you would actually want to know exactly what the person's title was. You would oftentimes have an example name of that person. You would know what their budget is. You would know how they're compensated. You would know exactly what their bonus structure looks like, how they're incentivized, what they like to do on the weekends. You would even know then what the buying decision looks like. So it's not just that person who's going to have to approve it. There's a whole slew of other people who have to be involved in that process. There might be, if you're selling enterprise software into a company, as an example, you have to get the buy-in from the user group and the person who might have the budget, but then it might be completely different as to, you have to get the IT person to actually approve opening up the ports, right? And you have to make sure that the CIO is actually okay with that purchase because some of it comes out of his or her budget. And so when you talk about customers, we're talking not only about who's actually signing the check, we're talking about the whole process of the buying decision. And oftentimes in the class, what we'll ask them to do is map out what exactly does that look like. Who do you talk to first? How many weeks does it take to get the next meeting? Then who do you talk to? Then who do you talk to after that? Then after they sign the contract, then what are the check marks that you have to get before you know that you can even go live within within their system? That could be a 9-month process, right? But you need to know that in order to understand a lot of other components around it, including customer acquisition costs.
For early stage startups, how do you gather all that information? Like you said, bonus structures and all that, isn't that?
You go and ask. Yeah, you go and talk to them, right? Our students in our class, they're asked to talk to, even if they're selling into businesses, they're selling into enterprises, they're asked to talk to 5 to 10 enterprise class customers. And those are the people who have the budget to actually purchase them. And that's within a completely academic context. So if you're actually making this your job, you should talk to 25 to 50 of those customers, right?
Isn't this sales? I mean, how is this different from like sales 101, right?
Sure, I mean, it is sales, but you'd be surprised how many entrepreneurs don't do it, right?
Yeah.
How many entrepreneurs who are engineers just sit in a cave and code for 30 weeks before they emerge and they start to think about this?
That's why you need an MBA.
Right?
Okay.
And I'm saying, I teach in the engineering school, so I'm saying, you as an engineer don't need the MBA, you can go do it yourself. Right?
Fair enough.
Because this is common sense to some extent, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do it before they start writing one line of code. Right, and we're talking about do this right before you even start product development. Don't even talk to me about product development until you can articulate to me at least a few scenarios of what this looks like. Yep.
So I've actually been in the process of a long discussion between doing product dev first versus customer research first. And the engineers all say, well, you need to just throw a product out there and then you can actually use like people's real understanding of just critiquing to critique the product, and then you can figure out your customer model. Or do you do more of the customer research and then decide to write the first couple lines of code?
Well, I don't think you'll ever understand what the customer problem is. You're creating product for a phantom problem then, right? Mm-hmm. Part of this is not just the buying process, it's also understanding what is the problem that you're solving. And is it a hair on fire problem? The only exception to that rule, though, is gaming, right? Because if someone had told me that Farmville was solving a hair on fire problem, I mean, come on, right?
Yeah, but what about the value of throwing out a minimum viable product and...
This is all part of it. Before you throw out a minimum viable product, though, we do talk about this, right? You go out and talk to customers. Talk to Eric Reese about it. He will tell you, go and talk to customers before you necessarily throw out any kind of minimum viable product. You won't know what your minimum viable product is unless you're doing this in conjunction with writing your minimum viable product. How do you even know what's minimum viable if you have no idea who your customer is?
I mean, don't you have of what you think the product should look like? And I mean, that's
But how
the
do you
whole
know what the
idea.
minimum viable product is if you've never talked to a customer?
But how do you show a customer words? And how do you explain words like this is what I'm trying to do and convey?
Why don't you ask them what their problems are? If they don't have that problem, if they can't even start to tell you, or if you can't ask the right questions to uncover whether or not they have a problem, you already have an issue. You don't know how to describe your product.
Sure.
Right? So it could be as simple as going in and observing your customer in action.
Sure.
So oftentimes, like we've had enterprise products where it's hard to describe what your life would be like if you had this product. And we feel like if we start to tell them all the wonderful things that it'll do for their lives, then they'll already sort of take them. So we go and we do time and motion studies. How long does it take for them to do the things that they're doing?
So how did Dig approach you?
Dig approached Mike, their servers were failing. They had so much customer demand that their servers were failing. Right? And the whole question was, we need $1 million, I think, to buy more servers because we don't know what we do with $5 million.
But they understood their customer first is the question, before going out and launching their new product.
I think so. Well, I think Kevin was his own customer, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So like this process is taking away, again, some of those unknowns, so identifying what the problem is that you're going to build your entire company.
Yeah, this is more the customer development process that you can read about in 4 Steps to Epiphany, right? And then the other part of the business model that we talk a lot about is then, this is more who are you, product. Oftentimes people talk about the product in this sort of, this is what we're building, this is the cool thing that it is, but a lot of times product is so much more than that, right? Because the real value that the customers and users get isn't actually from the thing that you're building. It might actually be from the data that you're collecting. It may be from the networks of just people that are within the product. It might be from the community. It might be from the content that's being generated there. There's a lot of different factors to what it is actually the product, right? So even within Apple, it's sort of, what is the product, right? It's not just the computer that you get to carry around, sort of the cachet of having it and showing it off to people and just this notion that it's a brand. And so this idea of product can be very loosely defined, and I would encourage you guys to think about it as broadly as possible, including your employees, including all of the assets that you have, because the broader you think about this, the more powerful you become. So a good example of that is one of our companies is a company called Spiceworks, and it's a business software company, but they created this software that any business could download automatically, and they would be able to automatically see all the assets, the IT assets within their organization. So it's sort of first glance, kind of a simple product, pretty cool for network administrators. So they love it, right? It's free, so they really loved it. What's interesting is that when they first launched this product, the board was like, this product is so good, we should charge for it. Right? And the CEO is pretty adamant, we're not going to charge for it. And the reason why is that he had this vision that the product actually generates very interesting data. So if you have all these small, medium businesses on your network telling you what assets that they have, how is that actually valuable? Right? Think about it. If you're Dell and you want to sell into small, medium businesses, interesting, your servers. What do you want to know about those customers? You want to know who has 2-year-old servers. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, Spiceworks has that data, right? And so the fact that they've given it out for free is a distribution mechanism to get that data. So don't think about your product from just what are you actually providing to the customer. Think about it from a business model perspective. Where do you want to take this? What is the most valuable thing that you can extract from your customer that then you can monetize? What part of it is a distribution strategy and what part of it is actually a product, right? And I think SolarWinds actually also does a really great job of this. They give away a lot of free products that's never meant to be freemium. They'll never charge for it. It is purely a customer acquisition strategy. And so understanding what part is actually product that you're going to sell and charge to your customers, right? Or I guess it's going the other way, sorry. You don't want to be paying your customers.